This tutorial will explain the Pan and Zoom filter found in the Boris Continuum Complete package. The filter has two purposes: to create virtual tracking shots over a single high-resolution image as source, or, most basically, for fast sophisticated import of stills even of unsuitable dimension. Although this tutorial is specific to Avid, the filter's interface will mostly look and handle equally across all hosts like After Effects, Final Cut, Premiere and Vegas Pro. The key strength of this filter is the workflow speed, which lets you set up complex pan and zoom moves in seconds, and the deep render options, which include motion blur. My name is CG Fell, and I'm a Germany-based freelance Avid editor and beta tester for Boris FX. In the next 15 minutes, it'll be my pleasure to take you through the following steps that will enable you to create beautifully rendered video from high-resolution still images. We'll start with the most basic setup for importing stills. Then we'll move to the basic animation workflow called AB Auto Animation, and finally we'll create complex pan and zoom moves using Avid's own advanced keyframes. One more thing before we start. Shortly after this recording, a new beta was released for the upcoming BCC 8.2. You'll notice a lot of green dots here. Now practically all filters are real-time whilst rendering in 16-bit. And that's not all by far. If you want to keep posted, check out borisfx.com, like us on Facebook, subscribe to this channel, and see the show notes for more. But now, without further ado, here's your training to become a pan and zoom master within 15 minutes. We start with still import, create a segment, and in the Effects tab, find BCC Perspective. If you have an older release, BCC Distortion and Perspective, now drag the BCC Pan and Zoom filter on the segment. The faster way of doing this is just to mark the segment and double click on the filter. Now we go to Effects mode. I really recommend though that you create your own workspace to do that, like effects editing, in order to get a better overview. If you hit Alt and hit one of these triangles, you'll open them all up at once and close them all up at once. The first thing we want to select is the source, and we want the source to be an external file, and we'll select this file. The next option is the aspect ratio. Square pixel is fine for images. Video Safecutter is a brand new option that will remap your color space from RGB to 601/709. If you don't have that option, I recommend that in the general controls you switch the safe levels off, go to the color correction mode. As you can see, it's illegal colors, adjust it manually like so. If you don't do that on the older release, you will crush the blacks or clip the highlights. If that's the case for you, I recommend creating a color correction preset to your bin, and you can use that next time. However, for us it's not the case, we don't need that. The next thing we're interested in is, why is it an animation? Well, the filter per standard is producing an animation. However, that's more than we want. We just want to still import. We go to Transform A, and in a preview mode, we can select the frame that we want. I want this. A little word on the box. You can move the box around freely. If you pull on the sides at the top bottom, you will enlarge it. If you hold Shift, the other side will remain static. Like so, if you hold Shift while moving the box, you'll have a horizontal and vertical lock, which can be handy. Same applies to rotation, where when you hold Shift, it'll lock to 45-degree steps. I'm happy with this frame, and I want to use this as a still. Exit preview mode. By the way, if you want to speed up the render process, hold Alt, and it'll render straight away without asking you where to put the render. And if we play that back, we're having a perfectly sharp still image. You can use it as a preset for a different picture in source. For example, this one. You're almost good to go. And you'll have a full resolution import without the need of importing media at all. Let's say you want to create an animation. The standard mode is AB Auto Animation. What this means, it's going to do an automatic animation. However, you can define where it starts and where it ends. If you go to preview mode, you have preview target A and B, which means this is the starting point, this is the end point, and you can also have a mixed display. We'll start with A, and by the way, preview settings, you can choose the preview monitor to be wherever you want it to be, or basically do not use it at all. In this case, top right is fine for me. I do want to start with this image, but second, I want to end up in the top here and see the sky. If you're wondering why you can't see what's in here and here, it's because we're at the beginning of the effect. So if you move to the end, it'll produce that image. You also have a choice of what you're seeing inside this box. If you go to preview settings, you can choose to only see the action safe or the title safe. I have both on. And the rotation control basically means that if you have it on, which is standard, you can rotate the whole affair. So you're already done. Now you can apply that to any picture you like. For example, this one. But the targets are a little off, so let's correct that. Let's say we want it to end here and want it to start here. And for some artistic reason, we decide that we want this to be exactly the opposite of what it is right now. That's pretty easy. Just go to BA, because then it will switch the targets and you'll start with their heads and end up with a button. You have an influence how this animation works. If you preview ease curve, you see what's happening. Hold start means how long it will hold the position until the effect starts, and hold end is the same for the end. With ease in and out, you can define the steepness of that curve. So let's just, for this example, say we want it a little bit faster. And if we render that out, we have a custom animation. If we review that, now the advantage is, let's say this was all a bit too fast. Let's expand it to double. Now the effect will automatically render the double time, and you can see that it says here that it thinks that it only needs to render this. This is an incorrect display, so I recommend you clear render at position, just re-render it. Let's review that, and you see you have a smoother movement without actually doing anything other than trimming. There are ways to customize that movement even further. For this example, let's choose this file, and as a starting point, let's do a zoom in onto this body painting here. And by the way, the source is always the picture source, and the sample is what's inside the box. Now B, we want to see his entire face. Now if we hit AB auto-completion, it'll do what we're used to. It'll do this effect like we did in the other example. But if we want more control, we can go to AB completion. We'll give you this completion category here, which is new. And what you do is you can set a start keyframe and an end keyframe, and say the end keyframe is 100. And as you can see, it's going to create a linear movement. If that's what you want, fine, but of course you have more options now. You can put it to spline, which will give you a smoother animation, and you can shift the keyframes. Usually you can shift them vertically. If you hold Alt, you can move them freely, and if you hold Alt and Shift, you can move the keyframe horizontally. If you hold Alt and Shift, by the way, you can also move this entire box. And if you zoom out too much, you can always reset the curve here. I want it to start at 0, and I want it to hold a little bit at the beginning. And I want this point here to end here. So I just mark that and say align keyframe, and it will automatically slip here. By the way, if you have set position to keyframe activated, this will not work the same way I just demonstrated, because each time you select a keyframe, the cursor will automatically jump there. If that's what you want, fine, but usually I find it distracting. So I just said set position to keyframe off. And if I want the animation to end here, I just mark the keyframe and tell it to align. And of course you can mark multiple keyframes at once and either drag them in this way, or you can decide to slip those, which basically means it's going to slip the last keyframe that you selected along with all others to that position. So in effect, what we've done is we recreated an animation, but this time using Avid's own keyframes. And this has a number of advantages. So let's review it. Okay, it works perfectly. If you stretch this effect out to be, say, double as long, you will see that the animation will be slower as well. The reason that is because the keyframes are set to be elastic. However, if you're adding a transition at the end or beginning of this effect, the effect will believe it is longer than it actually is. If you set it to fixed and stretch it out, you will see that the keyframes remained where they are. That difference is important, especially when you're applying transitions, because then the effect will become longer. Okay, let's move to the more complex animations. Well, we're going to add a little twist to the whole occasion. And I want to start at his feet. Then say 1 second later, I want to be focused on this ball in his hands, and will remain there for like 5 frames. 2 seconds later, I want to be focused on his head, and then I want to twist it out to show the entire frame, but we want to add a little twist to that, so that when it comes from here, it's going to twist. Of course, you can add as many twists as you like. Now at this point, in order to make the movement smooth, you switch to spline. Fixed is a good idea if you're later on planning to add dissolves without altering the effect's timing. And it's a good practice to remove redundant keyframes, which will basically eliminate all keyframes that have not been used. Now, once you review this, you may find you want to change the timing a little bit, like this is too fast. So all you do is you mark the keyframes that you want to change, you hit Alt, and you can change them right here and change the timing in this way. Say this is too fast too, you just change that keyframe and you'll have a slower movement. And you want to pause on this, so you just hit Control C, and a little bit later just hit Control V, and it'll produce the same keyframe there, and you'll have a little bit more pause. Now, one little trick, let's say we want to end up like this, but we want to see the picture with a little bit of movement. I just copy that keyframe to there, and in here I just make it a little bit smaller, so we'll always have a tiny little movement, making it a little bit more exciting. Again, you may want to remove the redundant keyframes. And at this point, I want to talk a little bit about the render options. Switch off preview mode. As you can see here, there's a lot of movement going on, so we might want some motion blur. I always go for the smoothest option, and I always go for the highest shutter. But if this is too much for you, you can define the shutter angel to be anything you want. For the purpose of demonstration, I'll go for the maximum. The adaptive motion blur option will basically make your render faster because it will analyze where it really needs to apply the motion blur. Quality. You either have motion blur or quality, which means here you can define it to be magic sharp, which basically means you can increase the sharpness and the way it upsamples. You can see the picture just became a little bit crispier. But when you're applying motion blur, actually you don't really need it because the picture will get a little bit blurry anyway. Deflicker is if your picture flickers, but usually you won't require that if you're working progressive. This is an option which may be a good idea to use when you're interlaced. One more word about motion blur. I apply it like 80% of the time. The only reason I don't apply it, or the only occasion rather where I don't apply it, is when I use text like a web page printout. And let's render that and review that. For me, the last part was a little bit too fast, so I just take these two keyframes and pull them to the end so we have a smoother transition here. So let's take a look at it again. Full screen. Oh yeah, that looks much more spiritual to me. One final tip. On rare occasions, you might find that your preview box is exceeding the black edges. The effect is doing this on purpose because it's trying to find a smooth curve between the present and the next keyframe. A very simple way to get around this, to copy the next keyframe, step ahead a couple of frames or just one, and paste the same keyframe. This will change the curve. As you can see, no more black edges. If you want to test drive this filter yourself, head over to borisfx.com and download the fully featured 30-day trial of Boris Continuum Complete, which includes another 200 plus filters. Under filter list, you can download a detailed PDF for each filter. And if you hit movie list, you'll even see a short clip for each one. Just select the category on top, then choose the filter. I hope you found this tutorial helpful. Feel free to subscribe and browse the channel for many more.